So let me tell you about the girls' night out that almost ruined my life. I grew up in a family with many siblings, and among those siblings was my sister, who we will call Destiny. Destiny and I were closer than any of our other siblings. We were mostly close due to our proximity in age. We were just 1 year apart. Even though we were close, there were some things that we didn't have in common. For example, I enjoyed listening to electronica and house music, and she was more interested in hip-hop and rap. She was also a party animal. Meanwhile, I enjoyed staying home and doing my own thing. It was no surprise to me one Saturday when Destiny said she was going out with a group of her close girlfriends. She had gotten dressed and was ready to head out when she asked me if I had seen her ID. Of course, I hadn't seen it anywhere and willingly helped her to search for it. We searched for a while before she concluded that she had lost it. She asked if she could use mine just for the night to get into the club. In case you're wondering, she and I had a very close resemblance. We looked so much alike that people thought we were twins. I reluctantly agreed to let her use my ID, and off she went. While Destiny and her friends were out that night, they ran into an old friend from high school who we will call Damien. In high school, Damien was popular, and he was the captain of the football team. All the girls wanted Damien, and he was very cocky. After high school, his dreams of making it to the NFL didn't come true, so from what I heard, he turned to a life of drugs and crime. I should mention that Destiny was one of those girls in high school who obsessed over Damien, so it was no surprise to me that she was happy to see him when she ran into him that night. Damien was with a friend that night, and they had spotted a guy who they had some sort of beef with. Damien and his friend noticed that the guy they had beef with had been hitting on Destiny and her friends earlier that night. He was asking the girls if they knew the guy, but none of them did. Damien suggested that the girls lure the guy back to a hotel so they could rob him. At first, they all said no, but then Damien told them that the guy had physically harmed his sister, and he wanted to teach him a lesson. Of course, my sister and her friends were upset once they heard that the guy had hurt another woman and immediately agreed to help Damien set him up to beat him up. The girls approached the guy and asked him if he wanted to leave with them to go hang out. Of course, he agreed, and they followed him to the hotel, all while texting Damien their location. Once in the room with this guy, everyone is drinking and smoking. Suddenly, Damien arrives at the hotel, and my sister opens the door to let him and his friend in. Once they are in the room, Damien and his friend began beating on the other guy. The other guy fought back really hard, almost overpowering his two attackers. Him fighting back only angered Damien and his friend even more. Suddenly, Damien pulls out a gun and opens fire on the guy. The girls run out of the room, down the hallway, and out an emergency exit. Damien and his friend catch up to the girls, and they all leave. That night, my sister comes home and makes no mention of what happened that night. I could tell something was terribly wrong, though. She looked like she had seen a ghost, and she stayed in her room. The next day I asked her for my ID, and just like the night before, she fumbled around looking for an ID that she would never find. I was so upset that she had lost my ID like she did hers. While in search of my driver's license, our doorbell rang. My mother answered the door, and about 20 seconds later, she yelled for me to come downstairs. Standing at our front door were two officers from the Detroit Police Department. They asked me to confirm my full name, and when I did, they asked me to come to the police station for questioning. I had never been in trouble with the police before, nor had I ever been questioned by the police. As I walked away with the police, I could hear my mother crying on the phone, telling my father, who was out at a baseball game with my brother, that they needed to come home immediately. When I arrived at the police station, they began questioning me about my whereabouts the night before. They asked me if I knew a man whose name I had never heard before. Of course, I told them I was home all night and knew nothing about a man by that name. The officers then asked me why my ID was at the scene of a murder if I was home and didn't know the victim. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that I was being named a person of interest when I had been home all night the night before. I couldn't believe that I would be wrapped up in a murder investigation when I had never even been in a fistfight before. I told the police that I didn't know anything about the crime, but they insisted I did and arrested me that day for murder. I knew better than to keep talking at that point, and I asked for a lawyer. My family had hired a lawyer to represent me, and less than a week after my arrest, the charges against me were dropped after I was found to have been home during the commission of the crime. However, the damage had been done. My mugshot had been made public. I had lost my job, missed my final exams at school, and been publicly humiliated by a search warrant that was executed on my family's home. If that wasn't bad enough, to make matters worse, detectives were certain I knew at least one of the assailants and threatened to bring me up on other charges if I didn't tell them who was involved. During that time, my relationship with Destiny had drifted so far apart that we barely spoke. I knew that Destiny was somehow involved because she had my ID that night and is the only one who could have brought my ID to that hotel that night. It really hurt me that she allowed me to take the fall for something I hadn't done. She didn't say a word and continued to live her life like normal while my life was turned upside down. During a conversation with my mom and my lawyer, they both told me that I had better give up whomever I was protecting. I decided after that conversation that I didn't deserve to pay for someone else's mistakes, and I told the detectives that I loaned my sister my ID that night. Destiny was questioned and then was arrested on charges related to the crime. For 2 years, I watched my parents go to court hearing after court hearing. I watched them fall behind on bills to pay for lawyers to fight for Destiny. Our family home even went into foreclosure. In the end, Destiny was sentenced to prison for a very long time along with her friends who participated in the crime that took an innocent man's life. We found out that Damien had lied about the victim harming his sister and, in fact, had wanted to harm the man over marijuana. I learned many lessons from this experience, but the biggest lesson I learned is to trust your instincts, always.